Fairy is a world of dark enchantments, of captivating beauty, of enormous ugliness, of callous superficiality, of humour, mischief, joy, and inspiration, of terror, laughter, love, and tragedy. It is far richer than fiction would generally lead one to believe, and beyond that, it is a world to enter with extreme caution. For of all things that fairies resent the most, it is curious humans blundering about their private domains, like so many ill mannered tourists. So go softly, where the rewards are enchanting, the dangers are real. In modern neo-pagan practice, there is often the misconception that fairies are merely sweet little nature beings who love to work with us and are always helpful, if only you leave sweet little offerings of candy and trinkets. Some of these misconceptions arise from Victorian art and literature, while some are based in more New Age belief. Long has the old folklore been forgotten of the more unseelie and dangerous fae which exist within the tales of Scotland, Ireland, and Britain. When we speak about the Seelie and Unseelie courts, it is important to understand these terms are words that come to us from the Scots language. Morgan Daimler speaks about these terms and their meanings within their video and essay, Disambiguating Seelie and Unseelie, where the word Seelie carries meanings of blessed, fortunate, or lucky, and Unseelie carries meanings of the opposite, unlucky, ill omened, or harmful. In folklore, this distinction is not as simple as good versus evil. The so-called Seelie folk are not harmless or kind in any human sense, and the Unseelie are not evil in the way we might imagine. Both can be dangerous. Both can deceive. These words, as I see them, are less about morality and more about whether an encounter leaves you fortunate or not. Daimler goes into great detail regarding the terminology and nuances of these terms within their essay, so I will link it below for a more complete understanding of how these words are often used. There are legends of encounters with mortal folk getting swept up and dragged away by the wild fairy host, also known as the Sluashi. The Sluashi are known for terrorizing humans, and any human that they may pick up in their wake is forced to be among them and participate in their antics until they are released. The Scottish tale of Tam Lin tells of a knight captured by the fairy queen, destined to be given as a sacrifice for the tithe to hell. A maiden named Janet rescues him, enduring the terrifying phantasms the queen places upon Tam Lin. Some tales tell of mortals caught up in a fairy dance, which seems to only last a few moments, but in fact lasts for 7 or more years. When the person comes back, they often find that their family and friends have passed away a long time ago, and they themselves turn to dust. Fairies like Redcap, who are known from Scottish border folklore, dye their caps in the blood of mortals they encounter. Kelpies and Iach Ushka are water horses who drag their victims to a watery grave, and darkly tales of beings like Jenny Greenteeth are told to children to keep them away from water, as they are known to lure children to their death. These are just a handful of the darker tales and beings of the fair folk that may be considered unseelie. As a witch who works with the spirit world, it is important to understand both the law surrounding these beings and the protections traditionally used against them. Before turning to the protective practices I employ in my own work, I will first recount these encounters that my mother and I have had with the Fae. When I was a child, my mother told me of the time she saw a fairy in her bedroom. She herself was a small child and had woken up from her sleep. By her door there was a glimpse of a 3.5-foot being grinning at her, which promptly ran from her sight. The cat, which was on her bed, was so spooked that she hissed at my mother. This little being was likely just a sort of mischievous pixie, curious and meaning no harm, but of course, not all encounters are so innocent. When I was a child of around 13 or 14, my father had taken me to a camping ground for his sports club. While I was there, I met a girl and we quickly became friends. We spent hours just walking and talking about our everyday lives. While we were talking, we came upon a pathway next to a flowing river that I had heard stories about. People had slipped in, been hurt, and even drowned. The girl told me of Balasia that was known in these waters, so of course neither of us wanted to go near it. But I felt something strange, like I was being drawn to the water. Step by step, I felt called closer and closer to the edge, as if something unseen was calling to me and pulling me in. In that moment, I was certain that it was a water fairy trying to lure me in. I decided then that I would not walk that path again, no matter how beautiful or enchanting it was. I spent the rest of my time among the trees and rescuing frogs from the pool pump. Many years later, and on the path of folkloric traditional witchcraft, I was carving a tined wand in honor of the horned beings in my practices and drinking wormwood tea as part of the ritual. My puppy had gone outside and started yapping and growling. I went outside to see if there was something going on, but there was no one and nothing about. I was particularly worried about intruders, but there had been no one there. I went to sleep in a bed of wrought iron, the same bed I sleep in now. It may seem insignificant at present, but it will become important to the story later on. In my dream, my puppy went ballistic again and was yapping at the door. The door was a Dutch door split in two so the top half can be unlatched while the bottom remains locked, and I opened the top half. Outside there was this large black goat with a hollow stomach and giant horns. He told me to come ride with him, and while the terror ripped through my body there was something else, and so I swallowed all of my fear and went for a ride to what could be considered the witch's Sabbath, or something akin to the Calyak's feast in the story of the Piper and the Puka, which I told in a previous video. From that night on, I began a devotional relationship with the Puka, offering berries and fruits to him and calling on him while outdoors. These are just some of the experiences that have had a large impact on me as I was growing up and exploring the other world. My understanding of fairies has grown from seeing them as the gentle, winged beings which featured on my childhood curtains to recognizing that they are complex and at times dangerous. This shift echoed through my deepening practice, which evolved into a more personal relationship with the other world and folkloric tradition. The good folk are named so, not because they are inherently good, but as a euphemism for their often dangerous nature. In the old days and even today in some parts of Ireland, people know not to mess about in fairy spots. Building your home on fairy roads could lead to some awful and terrifying consequences, and cutting of fairy trees like hawthorn and blackthorn could land you in serious danger. Avoiding these sorts of perilous actions is a good way of not offending these beings and staying out of trouble. The most common protection against the Fae, cited within much folklore, is the use of iron. Iron nails and iron horseshoes or cold iron is often used as protection against the fairies, as well as malevolent witchcraft and other spirits who may wish you harm. The horseshoe is often nailed onto a door or into a post, while a charm invoking the Holy Trinity is said over it, nailing the devil to his post. Any iron or steel nails which are knocked into the walls above windows and doors are also good general protection from many spirits. Cold iron is a reference to iron weaponry like knives, swords, and axes, which can also be used to defend against the Fae. In my encounter with the Puka, I mentioned that my bed is made of wrought iron. This makes it a naturally protective space, keeping away many of the harmful beings that might otherwise approach. It also leads me to a theory as to why the Puka remained outside my home and had to lure me out of my bed before I could ride with him. In the Irish tale of the Puka horse, the man remarks that he wished he had spurs. These spurs, being made of iron, would have offered protection against the Puka. While I was living in an apartment and sleeping in a different bed, it became apparent that I would need further protection from harmful spirits, particularly the nightmare or hag, something I may go into more detail on in another video. And so I crafted a charm from horse hair and a hag stone to hang above the bed. This charm has since been dismantled, and now I use the holy stone for other purposes. It is important to note that not all spirits are averse to iron, and for creatures like the redcap who wear iron, biblical and Christian religious symbolism may be better. Folk magic practice is replete with chants and charms which are derived from and use psalms and biblical verses, so you can take your pick. Another common protection, both effective and easy to carry, is salt. While it may not hold against spirits of the sea, it serves as a reliable general safeguard to keep close at hand. In some folk practices, seeds or grains of sand are used as a form of protection against fairies and other spirits. A jar is placed at the threshold and the spirit is compelled to count each seed before it may pass. I keep sea sand gathered from my own journeys to the coast, which I have found to serve this purpose well. What happens when you are out and about and have forgotten to bring any fairy protections with you? A well-known way to avoid being pixie-led and to break the enchantments of fairies is to wear your clothing inside out. This was said to confuse and repel the fae. There are many other charms of protection against the enchantments and harms of fairies which exist within folklore, including rowan and red thread, and carrying of certain herbs and flowers, but I won't go into them here. Whether you would like to keep the Fae away from you or to work with the Fae, it is important to know the protections against them for your own safety and also so as to not offend them. If you are building an altar to the fairies, it is not recommended that any of the above mentioned items be used. Instead of iron goblets, you could use glass or copper glasses. Instead of iron and steel blades, you could use blades made of pewter or brass. Wands of birch and other fairy woods gathered with care and respect are also suitable for a fairy altar and practice. Further than that, I do not engage with fairy beings inside my house or at my altar, but rather outside in my garden, and use an offering stone with a depression in it to leave offerings to the land spirits and fairies, which is inspired by the folklore of the Irish Bullain and the Scottish offering stones. The good folk are bound to their own laws and ways of being, and this is important to keep in mind when engaging with them on any level. At times they may bring blessings and good fortune, yet just as easily they may lead one toward misfortune or ruin. In the old days, people did not seek them out lightly. They left their offerings and moved on with their lives. Sometimes they may have so angered a fairy that fairy doctors would be called to assist with diagnosing and lifting the curse. There was always a respect for the boundary between our world and theirs. In my own experience, it is best not to walk about with fear, especially when calling oneself a witch. It is part of our nature to engage with the other, and for those of us drawn to the fairy world, it is better to walk with knowledge and attentiveness, remaining respectful to these otherworldly beings whose ways are so different to our own.